While the Great Lake was quite an unpleasant place at the best of times, it would still take quite a while to get back to the mainland. This is what happened in the meantime. After Ishmael buried her past in the Great Lake and decided to go down a path that she would decide for herself, rather than let anyone else do that for her, especially not a psycho captain. Also, with that example, letting a psycho decide for you, captain or otherwise, as history has taught us, has always led to disaster. Well, regardless, they've got quite the journey ahead of them. They'll likely need clearance to be able to head back to the mainland. And since it was 984-05 when they first started their journey across the Great Lake, and it's currently 984-07. I suspect it'll take approximately 2 months to get back to the mainland and to the next destination. And unless W Corp has warp trains that allow for vehicles, like they do with the Channel Tunnel between England and France, it will narrow down the list of destinations significantly. They're done with District 21, so it's either District 18, 19, or 20. Uh-oh. One of those is a place that likely has one of the damned dozen on their most wanted list, for reasons that were made abundantly clear in Chapter 4. As for the warp trains, they likely have a station in each of the port ships. They also likely make sure that they have a return ticket package for that district, as it would otherwise take a while to get back to the mainland. And that's assuming that transport can't be arranged to head back to the mainland, and even considering the nightmare that occurs with each journey for all except in first class. I mean, there was certainly a U-Corp board member in first class that was turned into a puppet by the distortion Jaehyun, the puppeteer. So if they were on that warp train, I suspect there's likely to be a warp train station on each of the port ships, although greatly reduced in service until a new supplier of power was found. After the previous supplier, the Bottom Corporation, disappeared virtually overnight. As for what's next, it's the miracle at District 20. Which hints at the next destination, and where the problems might arise. Let's go over the story more then. Dante observed that as their voyage on the Great Lake extended, as they still needed to sail back to the mainland, the list of things to keep Task Force Damned occupied, not to mention entertained, grew ever smaller. Clearly, of all the things that they decided to take into account before gathering all of the necessary personnel for retrieving the Golden Bowers, entertainment was clearly not one of them. They had a budget for weapons, food, vehicle maintenance, but entertainment, for some reason, wasn't a consideration. Even when it came to the Great Lake, where there was mostly water. I mean, the least they could have done is put on some music. Although I can see that it's going wrong quickly, as there's bound to be a few music critics on board. Regardless, it sounds like a serious problem, but then Roger asks if anyone has got any fun. Wulpurgis angrily completed that sentence by saying, "Stories to tell? No, for the 13th time." Seeing repeating the exact same phrase as possibly a talent if it could be called that. Asking if she was struggling to recall what she said moments ago. Marceau, in his usually autistic level of putting it, corrected her by saying that she repeated that phrase 28 times. At 30, he was planning to verify if she suffered brain damage. Specifically to the sorry if I'm struggling to pronounce this, the occipital lobe. Well, occipital region, as in that which deals with visual processing. Roger got the message. She's just that bored. I mean, there was nothing to do anymore, and backgammon was played backgammon was played so many times that it's not that entertaining. Gregor then had a job for her. Feeding the seagull on time, as it somehow became his responsibility after all of them grew tired of taking care of it. Ishmael reminded him that they'd have to let the seagull go once... Yes, the seagull go once they're out of the Great Lake, asking why he even let himself get attached to it. According to Gregor, it's apparently because of the way that the seagull looked at them, those woeful eyes. Ishmael saw them as average seagull eyes. Dante saw this as a growing problem, where they fought wing remnants, organized criminals, wing security, robots, abnormalities, distortions, psychotics, and even mutant creatures. Most they were able to take care of themselves, others they were able to survive with help. But at this point, it was abundantly clear that the Damned Squad were facing a losing battle to combat boredom. It wasn't a problem that had a solution. Dante had no interesting stories to tell, as they had no memories before they were found in District 4. All they could do was watch them suffer. Wait, isn't that what they usually do? Why should that day be any different? Putting them through the mirror dungeons was hardly exciting for them. Then there was Heathcliff, who didn't seem affected by this, as if he was distracted by something. He certainly wasn't calm and aloof to begin with. The anxiety was obvious to Dante. Then Heathcliff tried to get Virgilius's attention, which attracted everyone's attention, resulting in a frosty silence due to what was about to play out. Virgilius now had Heathcliff's attention. There are very few reasons why any of them would talk to him, and even fewer when they initiate that contact. This caused Ishmael to believe that he's gone insane, that he's finally snapped. You'll want to talk based on what happened over the last couple of months. Roger saw this as a side effect of the consultations. She wanted to call this sense of self-preservation loss syndrome. There's actually a medical term for that, Roger. It's called feeling suicidal. Dante was nervous about Heathcliff's actions. Heathcliff told them to shut their traps. He's not mad. His sense of self-preservation is just fine. Virgilius saw this as impressive. Surprise was rare for him in that series of misadventures so far, and this was one such occasion. He asked him what his business was. wanting to get to the point. Heathcliff was hesitant to speak, and not just because of knowing what happens when he, or indeed any of the others, Virgilius off. He's asking if their next destination was T-Corp. Yes, District 20. Virgilius asked back, does he really need him to tell him that? Well, I suspect he wants to make sure, and besides, isn't that part of your job as the guide? While you are the last resort in combat, due to the terms of your employment contract, it does not stop you from telling the others where they're going. But apparently Heathcliff was hinting at something, telling Virgilius that he knows what he's talking about. Virgilius understood, telling Heathcliff to be patient, though it seems to be a virtue that most of them are lacking. Not just because Mephistopheles isn't getting there any faster, where if everything goes according to the flow is something that he followed even before he was hired by Limbus Company, before N-Corp's taboo hunters wiped out most of his fixers. Well, those fixers in his fixer office that weren't already killed on the mission involving the ring. Heathcliff will make to it... He'll make it to his appointment on time. Dante lacked any context for this, so all they could do was watch as Heathcliff scratched the back of his head, although they understood that Heathcliff had enough anxiety to initiate a conversation with Virgilius. And after all that, apparently that's not all that Heathcliff had on his mind. There's the appointment. Then he faced the rest of them and asked if any of them had any history with T-Corp, asking them to show hands. If they have. Yi Sang has, as he's lived there once. Heathcliff reminded him that they've already dealt with his unfinished business. Yi Sang backed off after that. Heathcliff then confirmed his own suspicions. He's next to be dealt with. Sadly, they're still in the middle of that mad lake. Then he asked Dante for today's date. Dante was confused. How should they know? This irritated Heathcliff, asking if they can't tell the date. They have a clock for a head. Dante then reminded him that clocks and calendars are completely different things. Oh, it's getting worse, isn't it? Heathcliff can't tell the difference between a clock, which is used for measuring the time of the day, and a calendar, which is used to determine what day it is in the year. This was embarrassing to Heathcliff. Heathcliff sighed at this, and Roger commented that this was his 13th sigh that day. If he keeps that up, he might huff and puff that boat to pieces. Well, be thankful that abnormality isn't there right now, or even an aberration of it. Ishmael had a suspicion that Heathcliff was next, and whatever is waiting for him, he's going to have to prepare for it. Heathcliff saw it as pointless to hide it, and after a while explaining, Gregor decided to summarize what Heathcliff explained. Heathcliff was starting to feel that he's next. Now that Ishmael was done with her group therapy sessions, he has good reason to believe that, based on what Virgilius handed to him in their last consultation, it confirmed his suspicions, which means that he'll need some fancy clothes and other things to refine his looks before they get to District 20. Okay, that will require a lot to make him look refined. In fact, it would probably be easier to make the Incredible Hulk look refined when he's in full rage mode. Honglu noting that he's starting to feel restless, since they're still so far from escaping the Great Lake. Heathcliff, well, he confirmed this. So Gregor told them that there's not much that can be done about this until they hit solid ground, where they can actually go and find some shops to get what he needs. Heathcliff wasn't sure what to say. Rodya told him not to worry. She can definitely help him with that as soon as they find land. Heathcliff complained that they don't even know how far away from land they are. Then Faust announced that they've reached the end of the scheduled work period for the sinners. This caught Dante by surprise. So they commenced today's close of business for them, saying their usual routine piece as the light alarm played. Gregor made this boredom obvious, seeing it is not even a big deal. Ryushu was hoping to see an act of dramatic bloodshed for once. Ishmael was relieved that Heathcliff wasn't trying to stir up trouble for once. Well, he has enough on his mind right now, so he's too focused on that to stir up trouble. They got up from their seats and they all disappeared into the back door towards their quarters. Heathcliff wasn't prepared, and he certainly wasn't pleased, so he asked Dante if his wits were knocked off, along with their head. Dante didn't know what he meant, but understanding that Gregor wasn't completely wrong. Heathcliff was asking if they can't even mince words at that point, struggling to contain himself. This provided some amusement to Virgilius and Charon as they headed to their quarters. Dante was then left alone with the severely crestfallen Heathcliff. Then Don Quixote tried to get their attention, specifically Heathcliff, who understandably didn't take her seriously, asking what she's doing out there, telling her to run along and go and worship the fixers of District 20. Yeah, she actually does that, but that's something she'll do later, advising that he treats her well. Heathcliff has a look on him at this point that's more or less saying, "Are you taking the..." Don Quixote told him to let her finish, wanting to tell him something. She was confident and sat on the temporarily vacant Charon seat, whispering to them she has devised a plan for him. Well, forgive me for not setting off a firework display with Hard Rock Hallelujah playing in the background, but we are talking about someone who thinks all fixers are noble and altruistic, as opposed to them typically being soldiers of fortune, with a variety of roles, and are as common as retail workers are in our world, where she's known to cause trouble for the damned dozen because she wanted to play the hero, getting on the bad side of Virgilius in the process. So you'll forgive me for not being optimistic about this plan that she's about to speak of. Heathcliff decided to humour the mad blonde. Dante lacked the words that were expressive enough to describe the look on Heathcliff's face. They both had suitably low expectations for Don Quixote and her plans, but Heathcliff was clearly looking for anything that could help him with his problem, hoping that Don Quixote could have a plan that worked. Not that Heathcliff's internal struggle mattered to Don Quixote. She was excited about describing her plan. She asked if he'd heard of the tale of the ancient and legendary fixer that was affiliated with Deviat Association, known as the Red Sack. and it was clear that Heathcliff did not, asking if he was like Virgilius. No, Virgilius is the Red Gaze. Anyway, according to Don Quixote, the legendary Red Sack carried out his deliveries no matter how terrible the terrain, or how arduous the journey was to all corners of the city. Ooh, that would require some serious augmentations dedicated for, well, two rather, traversing distances. Yes. Augmentations dedicated to traversing distances. Virgilius certainly has some regarding speed. Yes, artificial muscle fibers. And with the Red Sack was his sidekick Reindeer Man. Oh, seriously, are we talking about Santa and Rudolph as if they were a festive version of Batman and Robin? Depending on how long ago this was, and how long the current iteration of Arcorp has been operating. For all we know, Reindeer Man could be the last of a batch of reindeers that, well, it wouldn't violate that law on having more than one of any iteration of a person being around for longer than a week, as all others would have been dead. Either that or he was just some delivery person with a reindeer fetish. She also mentions that the Red Sack gave away gifts for children of the city, and he was deemed to be kind. Well, that's a rarity. And he could also clearly afford to do that, with the amounts that Colour Fixer earns. Apparently, it's common knowledge. He appeared on the front cover of Fixer's Monthly every winter. And she was genuinely shocked to hear that Heathcliff has never heard of the Red Sack. Heathcliff asked what would make her think that he'd read rags like that, and Don Quixote took offence to this, asking Dante if they've heard of that publication. Dante was silent, banging their clock head with their hands. He didn't really need, well, they didn't really need to spell this out for her. They are amnesiac. They don't remember anything before District 4. And that includes if they had any subscriptions to any publications. Don Quixote, you should know this by now! Don Quixote was disappointed that neither of them have subscribed to it, seeing her words falling on deaf ears. Well, not all of them worship fixers like you do. I mean, Dante didn't even know about it until you told him about it. Then she spoke of the matter at hand. What matters to Heathcliff is that he wants to make himself look presentable for the occasion that he was preparing for. Heathcliff was feeling relieved that she was getting to the point. She suggested a costume more, or rather, most fitting, or befitting, that occasion. And that would be that of the Red Sack and his sidekick Reindeer Man. Heathcliff was not pleased by this suggestion, asking what makes her think that he'd ever wear rags like that, like those ridiculous Fixers del Atardeka RD whatever. Don Quixote didn't see this as ridiculous. In fact, he hasn't even considered the possibility that they cosplay as the Fixers del Atardeka Ardiente together. Yes. I'll leave it at that, as I still struggle with English, never mind any other language. Not even giving us a chance. Telling him not to speak on matters that he knows nothing about. He was starting to get this blended plan was starting to go nowhere, where all it comes down to was that fixer nonsense again. He doesn't even have the energy to beat some sense into her. He'll do that later, intending to hit her on the head 5 times. Heathcliff, that won't affect her at all. She's already lost the plot. In fact, not only that, she's burned the script as well. Heathcliff had low expectations regarding Don Quixote's plan, and they have been met. Then she asked him to share his thoughts on the fixers they've met so far. Heathcliff didn't know what she was on about. Don Quixote asked if they looked embarrassing. Were they not fancy and impeccably dressed? Heathcliff saw them as embarrassing insults. Well, let's look at the ones we know so far. Virgilius looks like he was using the same tailor as Gomez Adams. Gloomy yet tasteful. The Mola Boatworks didn't need to look stylish due to their work. Then he remembered that spandex bloke from K-Corp. He looked like he leaped right out of a circus. Ah, yes, Siegfried, you have a point there. I wouldn't be caught dead in that outfit. Don Quixote especially took offense to that, saying that he was not embarrassing, seeing his outfit as rather dashing, wanting to explain the materials of its fabric to improve his understanding. Dante was silent at this, and just as Heathcliff was about to walk back to his cabin, Don Quixote told him that she wasn't finished. Heathcliff was asking why she was so hyper that day. Don Quixote admitted that Siegfried was a special case, but she asked if most fixers were all rather well dressed and wore honour upon their sleeves. The former, yes. The latter, where the have you been? Ishmael's right. We'd get a more believable opinion out of a wall. Heathcliff shared the same mentality as me, although he just voiced his confusion about honour. But he did agree that they dressed well. Don Quixote confirmed this and intended for him to be a well-dressed individual as the fixers are. Heathcliff knew all about clothes or making himself look fancy, so lacking a better plan, he decided to go with this, asking where will they get those clothes in the middle of a lake? Apparently, Don Quixote thought of that as well. Don Quixote asked him to recall the events of the previous day, the sirens that echoed across the bus. Dante mentioned that it occurred just before the close of business. They told them that Faust said the backdoor volatility wasn't anything for them to worry about. Don Quixote asked, how doesn't Faust determine? Or rather, how does Faust determine? Okay, let's start again. How does Faust determine which volatility is useful and which is not? As all were crowded by the back door, preoccupied with returning to their quarters, she was secretly and stealthily availing herself the chance to take a glance at the screen. Dante understood that she looks at the screen asking if she knows how to read those complex symbols. Don Quixote didn't have a clue, yet when she looked into them, she could tell what some of the symbols indicated. She saw the symbols of the red sack and reindeer man. Next to them was a symbol indicating posh outfits. Heathcliff didn't think that it'd be that simple. Is it ever? Dante agreed with him, yet it didn't discourage Don Quixote. She was clearly expecting him to say that, asking if every so often certain symbols appeared on the numerous doors past the back door. This confused Heathcliff. Don Quixote then continued that every chance that she could, she was watching them carefully. Yesterday, when she was in the corridor, she saw the door with the exact symbols that she saw on the screen. Dante asked if Don Quixote, and then she replied with, she did. She couldn't help herself. She only looked at what was on the other side. She didn't go to the other side of that door. At least not yet. She witnessed from that door that all of her deductions and predictions have been proven true, asking him to forgive her for this. Heathcliff asked that absolute muppet, why in the bloody hell does she keep doing what everyone tells her not to? Dante saw the irony of him saying that, as that's what he's been doing as well, regarding the last time he went down that corridor, past the part of it where it was safe, and this was embarrassing to him. Dante hadn't forgotten about the time when he ignored all the warnings and was almost lost to them. Although it's different this time, as last time he didn't know what was beyond the door. They do now. Then Dante asked if she's suggesting that they call everyone over to explore that place. Don Quixote saw that 3 of them would be enough to handle this task. All tales begin with a party of 3. Dante asked if she's just scared of the consultation. Yes, through well, we remember what happened last time she had one with Virgilius. She claimed to not know what they were talking about. Dante was considering telling them that it's too dangerous and shoving them back into their respective rooms to rest up for tomorrow. Don Quixote told Dante that the place on the other side of that door was most peaceful to her eyes, seeing it as a simple task. They just need to enter there and get a few sets of clothes for Heathcliff, and then get back out. Dante understood that she wasn't helping Heathcliff purely out of kindness. She wanted adventure, or at least get a cosplay outfit for the fixers that she particularly worshipped. But if they can find some nice clothes to put Heathcliff's heart at ease, Dante wanted to do something about this kind of situation before it gets out of control, like it did last time when they let Ishmael's anxiety grow worse. Dante okayed it, but warned them that they will be leaving at the first sign of danger. Heathcliff was starting to question Dante's insanity. Or rather, Dante's sanity, in questioning if he's lost it, or they've lost it. Oh, you get the idea. Dante reminded him that he was willing to go if it meant that he could get some clothes. Heathcliff saw it as okay as long as Dante was with them. Don Quixote told them to meet up tonight at Dante's quarters, knocking with the following rhythm: knock, 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 knock. Whisper a secret code in which Heathcliff told her to just get some sleep. Dante hoped that this wouldn't be a waste of time. They agreed to the time to meet up before heading to their rooms. They waited for all of the others to be sound asleep. Don Quixote spoke of them assembling. Heathcliff hoped that this was worth the trouble, not having a lot of confidence in her plan. She believed that it would be worth the trouble. They followed her, making sure that they made as little noise as possible. Dante was asking if they were really crossing the line. Heathcliff was still traumatized, asking if she knew what happened last time he crossed it. She saw it as different this time. They just need to follow the corridor immediately to the right of the delineation line and open the door there. Dante understood that the symbols that she was talking about passed that door, through the window. They saw the symbols: a sack, a wrapped present, and what appeared to represent fancy clothes. The symbols of the red sack and the reindeer man. She confirmed this. Heathcliff, seeing her with the expectations that are appropriate with this. So they're going in, and Heathcliff barged through, despite Dante telling him to move. Despite Dante telling him to move slowly and hold on. They went through and found themselves somewhere else. A place decorated with numerous Christmas-themed ornaments, warm cozy lighting reflected off wooden flooring, and conveyor belts installed all over the place. Dante saw this place as a factory, Don Quixote understanding this place as such. Heathcliff asked what those things are. They looked like little children. Don Quixote indicated that he should keep quiet now. And then she announced her presence, much to the anger of Heathcliff. The small figures froze for a moment before turning around in their direction. They certainly weren't human. Although Don Quixote has already met them. Then Dante was angered by this, asking what happened to the sneakiest of pigs. Heathcliff noticed something coming their way, a small but larger than the others around it figure, scurried over and stood before them. Recognizing
Don Quixote, who finally graced them with her presence once again, Ome. And just as she did before, poof! Appearing from the most unexpected place again, Ome.
Was she a test subject of W-Core? Now that would explain her insanity. Dante wanted to know why that was. Don Quixote identified him as one who shall grant them the wonderful gifts. The red figure rubbed what appeared to be hands together, looked up to them and startled. And then started to talk about what they needed to regarding this.
Who was pleased to make the acquaintance, Ome. It must be Don Quixote's friend Ome's. He was Dodoru, a gnome who works at the gift factory, Ome. And why, of course, I make gifts there, Ome.
Dante didn't know what to make of that gnome, and Don Quixote confirmed this one to be a gnome, as if it was obvious. Dante asked if they're not humans. She confirmed this. They're not humans, they're gnomes. Dodoru confirmed,
Of course, not human Omes.
Heathcliff didn't think that non-humans were allowed in the city. Dante understood them to be something else, not abnormalities or distortions.
Dodoru was aware of the city.
Don Quixote couldn't care less if they weren't human. They commit themselves to the work that they do.
Dodoru saw her as correct, Ome.
Dante asked if they've heard Dodoru say something weird about the city just now. Heathcliff certainly did. This made Dodoru nervous. He said,
Wait, Ome? Asking if they wish for any present Omes. They have fancy clothes and powerful weapon Omes, or delicious cookie Omes.
Heathcliff asked if they really had them. Dodoru, noticing that he has Heathcliff's attention, he told them to follow him, and introduced them to the reception hall, leading them to a room with, in his scurrying gates. Dante saw this as more of a storage space than a reception hall. Don Quixote was largely unconcerned. It had a warm fireplace and a table. Seeing it as cozy, what more could they ask for? Well, I can think of one thing. Mood-stabilizing medication, as at least one of you will have need of it.
Totoro even had delicious refreshments ready for them as well, Ome. Asking them to please wait a moment and he'll be right back with the gifts that they want, Ome.
He then bowed, opened the door, and scuttled out of the room. Dante asked if reception halls were usually that barren. As Dante lacked a frame of reference, so they had to ask, but even with their limited experience, something was off about that situation. Apparently, Don Quixote heard a rumour that it's the kind of decor that's been catching on in recent years. Heathcliff heard that as well, where it's popular for some blokes to deliberately leave their stuff lying around in some half-finished looking buildings. Dante asked if that's what that was. Don Quixote told them not to worry. She shall personally be responsible for that expedition and claim themselves shiny gifts. Heathcliff was willing to steal them, especially the expensive-looking stuff. Has he learned nothing from the hair salon coupon instance? In fact, Don Quixote even pointed that out, telling him, no thievery. This was annoying to him, but he agreed not to do so. He was as foul-mouthed as he usually was, but his anxiety was easing. Perhaps it was comforting for him that they're looking for something that he needed. Dante asked him if it was that important that he dress well for that occasion. It was. Dante felt more comfortable bringing this subject up, sensitive as it was. At least in their current atmosphere. They asked if someone's waiting for him there, someone to dress up for. Heathcliff admitted that they weren't wrong. This caught Don Quixote's attention. She dragged her chair closer to Heathcliff. He told them that he had to go back as a successful man, as someone with great worth. He had a serious look at that point. He told them that they'll know that he's changed, that he's no longer that witless brigand, Heathcliff. Well, you're right. You're now a witless mercenary. That's actually quite an improvement, as you were previously fighting for organised crime rather than fighting organised crime. Well, those that got in the way, anyway. It's why he has to dress posh when he returned, to appear like a man of quality. It'll take more than a nice suit for you to appear as that. Don Quixote asked if he had a rival. Dante asked if it was about revenge, like Ishmael. Dante is literally written on his baseball bat. Heathcliff considered that, as he leaned back on his chair. It creaked as he rocked gently back and forth. He was looking inwards, which was showing in an expression that Dante hadn't seen on him before. He admitted that Dante could call it that, but what he really wants to do is make her regret. That's what this is. He wanted to show them, to trample over those who thought that he wasn't worth, so that she'll regret not choosing him, so that she'll feel regret down to the deepest reaches of her heart. He wanted to prove to Kathy that there was no better man for her than him. Kathy. That name was clearly significant to Heathcliff. Dante was able to figure that much out. His eyes trembled when he spoke her name. Dante understood that she might be pretty important to him. Heathcliff confirmed that she was. Dante asked what happened between him and Kathy, or Catherine as he sometimes called her. Apparently the story was long and complicated. A story that will be covered in this, Chapter 6, when they get to District 20. Don Quixote suspected that Kathy was a lover of his. Dante asked if that was what she was to him. Heathcliff said no to that, denying this, although he hinted that it might be a little, stuttering like Sinclair on a bad day. While Heathcliff was lacking in subtlety like he usually was, he smiled at the mere mention of Kathy. Now that was enough answers for Dante, for now at least. They all had a reason for joining Limbus Company. Heathcliff did so because he had unfinished business with Kathy. Dante wondered what kind of person she might be to be considered special and precious to Heathcliff, who told them not to be overdramatic. That's not him. Dante made it clear that this wasn't out of obligations as manager. They truly wanted to help him out, so that he can be the best man for her. Don Quixote confirmed this, saying that they shall all be people of what? A door then opened. It wasn't the reception hall door, the one that was made of wood. It came from a dark corner of the room. They heard the sound of metal scraping against wood, accompanied by a howling blizzard. Dante saw that as sleigh marks. They saw a huge sleigh on the wooden floor, flanked by several gnomes. It was red and had sacks that were either black or red, but they seemed to all be littered with flesh and blood. The cherry gnome shouted to Dodoro that
they've got his next batch of ingredients right here, Ome.
The leafy gnome
complained that it's back, Ome.
The shadowy gnome
assured its friend, Ome, asking them to just think about the looks on their friends' faces when they open their present, Ome. All is worth it, of course. Well worth it.
Leafy concurred. The gaggle of gnomes walked in their direction. They chattered and gossiped. Then they froze in place, upon noticing them. Cherry told them to
quick, no gagging, Ome.
Leafy told them to
quick chit-chatting and help them out, Ome. They've got a process, Ome. I love the process. Besides, they brought some live ones this time, Ome.
Dante thought that they saw some sacks on the sleigh move, thrashing like something was trying to escape. Dante asked, was that? Heathcliff told Don Quixote to grab her weapon. Don Quixote couldn't comprehend this, seeing them as hard-working. Then they heard something from someone, asking if someone was out there to please help them and get them out of there.
Truly saw it as a joyous day, Ome. That one's fresh, Ome.
Don Quixote couldn't believe this. Shadowy
pointed out that they're human Omes.
Leafy asked if Manager Dodoro brought them in, Ome. How do you manage to bring humans so fresh, Ome?
Don Quixote was shocked to find out that the gift factory all along. Then Dodoro walked in.
He did a blunder, Ome. That sleigh wasn't supposed to come in there, Ome. Tell them not to worry, Ome. Just a little game between the gnomes.
Dante asked if that was his excuse, seeing it as even more pathetic and unbelievable than Gregor's. Don Quixote she addressed Dodoro, who was listening. She wanted to know the contents of those sacks. He told her that the
raw materials for presents, of course, Ome. Besides, Don Quixote, Ome. Well, Dodoro's prepared some fancy clothes for her and her friends to wear, Ome. Why don't they head out? Right out to where?
Don Quixote figured out that what he meant by raw materials was in fact people. Considering that one of them on that sleigh was still alive. This angered Dodoro, who was
Tired of lie, Ome. Human Omes. Humans, like them, complaining to subordinates about them using that storage space, Ome. Telling them that it was off-limit, Omes. Are they going to deliver nothing but disappointment to their neighbours, Omes? Even now, they await gifts from the factory, Ome.
Leafy saw this as a mistake on their part. As annoying as this was to do, Ome.
He went on to say that
He's already told the factory director to look forward to that badge, Ome.
this made Dante nervous, asking themselves, what were they thinking? This was definitely not worth it. Heathcliff understood that the time for talking was over. It's fighting time now. Telling them to start with a strategy. They need to get out of there. This made Dante snap out of it and get on with making the most of what they had. Dodoro then
Told the other gnomes to grab their tool, Omes. Fresh local produced materials coming up, Ome.
Heathcliff told those little bags to crack on, and they fought the gnomes that attacked them. They're in quite a situation, and they don't even know where there is at this point. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!